What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video, and in today's video we're going to be talking about Dune. So Dune is a brand new remake of the original Dune film, as well as just a new adaptation of the Dune book series, which I actually looked online and there's 15 of these books. I do want to make it completely open and transparent out of the beginning, saying that I'm not a crazy fan of this series. I've never read any of the books, and I've seen the original film with Sting a couple of times, but it's been many years. I meant to revisit it before this movie came out to do a revisit, kind of get a fresh kind of take on the film and do a review here on the channel. I still plan on doing that, but obviously that did not happen in the timely manner I was hoping for. But yeah, here we are talking about the brand new film, a film that was delayed due to the pandemic, as many other films were, and we're finally getting it. Directed by Denis Villeneuve, who's given us films like Prisoners, Arrival, Sicario, Blade Runner 2049, a really phenomenal director that has a really great eye for just directing overall, obviously, but just a really great visual style to his films. And when you saw the trailers for this, you can totally tell his style was completely riddled all over this movie, and it just looked like it was going to be a really great visual spectacle, and I'm happy to say that it was. With that said, I definitely have some criticisms, but I do want to make it clear really quickly that there will be no spoilers in this review. However, I do want to tell you guys something right off the top that I think is really important to know when going into this movie. Don't worry, it will not be a spoiler for the story in and of itself in any way, shape, or form, or anything that happens to any characters. Trust me, no spoilers. But something that's important to know is, like I just mentioned, Dune is originally an older movie based on a book series, and the book series has about 15 books in the entire thing. And so yeah, this movie opens up, and when we see the title card that says Dune, it also says Part 1 beneath it. And not too long ago, Warner Brothers actually came out saying that they were going to base the success of this film not only on the box office gross, but also on how it does on HBO Max, because this film is in theaters as well as on HBO Max. I just came home from seeing it at AMC Dolby screen, which was beautiful. It was a great way to see the film. But yeah, it is on HBO Max as well. And so they made it pretty clear that based on how it performs on HBO Max as well as how it performs in theaters is how they're going to kind of base its success, which is a new thing. A lot of movies have been, kind of left on the shelf. There's been plenty of films that have come out with a franchise that they're trying to start off and have never continued simply because they just didn't do well at the box office, even if it found its audience years later on streaming or just kind of, having the movie be out there with more time. Ultimately, with so many movies that there are nowadays, it's just kind of impossible for everything to be a hit, even if it deserves to be. And so what did I think about this movie? Well, I found it to be an incredibly well-crafted film. However, I really do want to just completely highlight the fact that this movie does say Part 1 at the very beginning, and I think that's very important when going into critiquing this film. With that said, I definitely have some criticisms, and I can say right out of the gate that this is not a movie that's going to work for everybody. If you're into big sci-fi fantasy epics like I am, anything from Star Wars to Lord of the Rings, even something like Star Trek, a world filled with really deep and rich lore, with great costume design, a great look, feel, and vibe, and just big over-the-top sci-fi and fantasy concepts, then you're definitely going to enjoy this film. One thing I love about this film that a lot of great sci-fi and fantasy films do is that they speak within universe, So while you're watching the film, they're talking about different people from different places, on different planets, on different things, talking about different technology, this, that, and the other. And, it's similar to those other franchises that I mentioned. You won't really be able to retain all the names and all the places and all the things on first watch. It's definitely going to take multiple viewings, and I think there may be moments when you're watching this film where you're not fully invested in everything that's happening, simply because a lot of the verbiage and a lot of the names of different people and the places that they're going to are so foreign to us because it's a sci-fi kind of thing. And if you're not familiar with the franchise, like I'm not super familiar with the franchise, then you may kind of have these moments where you're not super engaged in everything happening. With that said, I do love the way that they kind of built the world and just the lore in this film. And after the film, I do have a little bit more of an understanding of how this universe really works. Again, I've seen the original Dune film, but it's been so long, and I don't really feel like I can speak to that film properly. Denis Villeneuve really gives us a really stunning film in terms of its visuals. Overall, this film is incredibly well crafted in terms of its technical elements. The performances are stellar. You have great cinematography. You have a great use of practical effects as well as digital effects, and it all blends together seamlessly. Pretty much on the craft level of this film, the way that the film looks, feels, everything about it, it's incredibly well done. The sound design was fantastic. You have a fantastic and gripping score by Hans Zimmer that I thought was really compelling throughout the course of the film and really set the tone for the film. And overall, the film was incredibly well crafted. Where I struggle with this film overall and how I feel about it is that it is the first chapter of a story. And so ultimately, this film kind of leaves you with a lot to be desired. If you've seen the trailers, if you've seen the posters or any of the marketing material, there's a lot of huge faces in this movie. You got Timothée Chalamet, you got Rebecca Ferguson, Josh Brolin, Jason Momoa, Oscar Isaac, Zendaya, and so many others. The list just goes on and on and on. There's so many faces that are recognizable in this film. And what I think that this film struggled with is because it's trying to really focus on the character of Paul, Timothée Chalamet's character, I believe that's how you pronounce his last name. Yeah, since it's really focusing on him and Rebecca Ferguson, throughout the course of the film, a lot of these characters that you thought were going to be way bigger parts of the movie really aren't. And so there were a lot of elements throughout the course of the film where I just kind of found myself not overly attached to the characters and their journey because you just don't really have a lot of time with said characters. Now, of course, I'm not going to give any spoilers for anything, but, you know, while I was watching it, there was a lot of moments where I was just like, oh, didn't expect that person to be gone so soon. And, you know, I won't, again, get into any of that. But overall, while watching the movie, I just kept thinking to myself, you know, this is nearly a 3-hour-long movie. It is a long runtime, and it does feel really slow at times, and I just don't feel super attached to everybody. However, I do think that this film does a really good job of setting up our main character, Paul. I really do feel like this could be a film that is going to be a lot better in retrospect once we have the other pieces, you know, once you've had the rest of the story. This is a 3-hour movie, but it felt very similar to when you watch the first episode of a really intriguing television show. You're not super engaged with everybody. Maybe the main character is the person you're most engaged with in their story, but you don't really know all the other characters yet, and the film or the TV show hasn't really given you a whole lot of time with them. And since this movie is cramming in tons of lore, tons of characters, and setting up for this epic, you know, sci-fi fantasy series, there are a lot of characters and a lot of story elements that kind of fall to the wayside as they really focus on our main character, Paul, played by Timothée Chalamet. And so, yeah, overall, by the time the movie was over, I just wish I was more gripped into the characters and into the story. But overall, I can't lie, I was incredibly entertained throughout. The movie was incredibly impressive in terms of how it looks, the music, and everything about the way that the film was put together was incredibly impressive. And I just wish that I was more attached to all the characters and that there was some real big 3-act structure story that I could really hone into. Overall, while I was watching it, there was also another feeling of kind of the movie being a little bit aimless. We know where it's going, there are things that are happening. It's definitely not a uneventful film, but, you know, at the same time, it doesn't really feel like it's a plot-driven film. It's very much a film where we see our characters going through different things, and there's times where they have motivation behind their actions, but a lot of other times it's just kind of characters kind of being, you know, pushed into different situations because of the dangers around them or whatever the case may be. And ultimately, by the time the movie's really coming to a close is where we're really stumbling into the adventure. And so some people might call that to be a spoiler, but ultimately I think it's important to know that when you're going into this movie that this is an incomplete movie, an incomplete story overall. They're setting up for more, and ultimately I think it's going to be based on the success of this film. The perfect example I can give that this movie reminded me of that I just recently saw in the last few years was the film Alita Battle Angel, which is based on a manga series. I believe there's an anime as well. But yeah, that first movie is great. It's also nearly 3 hours long and is a visual spectacle. But one of the downsides of that film is that it didn't really do well in theaters. And because it didn't do well in theaters, now it's kind of an incomplete story, and we don't know if we're ever going to get any sequels. And because of that, that film suffers. It was entertaining. I thought it was really cool. I thought the world building and the lore was fantastic. But when you watch that movie now, if we never get a sequel to it, it's an incomplete story, and it ultimately leaves you unsatisfied because it's building up to something that really never happens in that movie. And so similarly, this is a film that, you know, sets up a story, sets up a lot of stakes, sets up a lot of characters that you are assuming are going to return, and there's a lot that's going to be going on, but ultimately has a lot more story to tell. And so I think it's really going to be dependent on how people receive this film. And I can ultimately say that I don't think this movie is going to work for everybody, but I really thoroughly enjoyed it for what it was, and I'm excited to see where the rest of the installments come in. My biggest criticisms definitely have to be that it doesn't have that traditional 3-act structure that really allows you to really buy into all the characters outside of them being cool or well acted or anything like that. There really isn't a whole lot when it comes to a lot of the characters outside of our main couple characters, and ultimately I just wish that was a little bit different. And the last criticism I really give this film is that there are quite a few moments where it was pretty slow. I remember the original being pretty slow as well, but yeah, there was definitely moments in this film where I kind of thought to myself, I wish the pace would pick up just a little bit. But ultimately the score, the visual effects, the cinematography, the costume design, the performances, all of that really kept me engaged, and ultimately I got to give it more of a positive grade in my mind than anything else. So that's my thoughts on the latest Dune. Can't wait to hear what you guys have to say. Are you excited for this series to continue? Are you going to see this movie? Have you already seen this movie? Do you not care about about this movie, leave any and all those comments down below in the comment section, and I'll see you guys in the next one, all right? Bye-bye.